To our top story, Keir Starmer has suffered a mass rebellion in the Commons, with 10 of his frontbenchers resigning overnight, including Shadow Ministers Jess Phillips, Afzal and Yasmin Qureshi. 56 MPs in total defied Sir Keir and the three-line party whip by supporting an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, despite the Labour leader's warning to abstain from last night's parliamentary vote.
Meanwhile, the Tory party faces challenges of their own. Rishi Sunak has vowed to do what is necessary to ensure migrant deportation flights to Rwanda take off next year, and that he will not allow a foreign court to block them. It comes after the Supreme Court ruling that the policy is unlawful. Well, The Sun's Trevor Kavanagh is here to discuss all of those fallouts now. First of all, what do you make of the Labour rebellion we saw yesterday?
Well, at any other time, it would be serious. And I think that when you've got 50-odd Labour stalwarts, people on the front bench and people with careers to think about, actually defying the Labour leader and losing their jobs, then you're in serious territory. But frankly, nobody's looking at Labour at the moment, and it will in many ways make Keir Starmer look firm and leaderly. And so it will look as though he's a man of integrity who's sticking to his guns, which is very important. But all attention's focused elsewhere, isn't it?
Trev, I'm so glad you come in on a Thursday. We appreciate your time enormously. Can we just have an overview from you, the legend, on quite simply, I mean, we've said it since Monday, what a mad week in politics. Monday, Braverman gone, right? Cameron, from nowhere, gets out of a bulletproof Land Rover in Downing Street, gets ennobled and is now the Foreign Secretary. Tuesday, Suella Braverman's letter. Let's get in before the Rwanda thing. Yesterday, Rwanda. Overnight, the Labour Party. Whether people like this, it's fascinating, isn't it, at the moment, Trev?
I think it is. I mean, they used to say a week is a long time in politics, but with inflation, it's probably an hour now. And things are happening so fast, I can't keep up. The Prime Minister can't keep up. The Labour Party's just sitting there watching, rubbing its hands. So,
let's start with Braverman. What was your take on that this week?
Well, I think that in the end, she made it impossible to stay as Home Secretary. She deliberately went ahead with an article for the Times, which 90% of the population would agree with, but which Rishi wanted amended. She refused to do so. He had no alternative, and she knew that. So what we've seen is a predictable sequence of events, followed by the events of the last 24 hours with the Supreme Court ruling, which they've said basically they're going to challenge, but nobody knows how. Nobody's explained quite how, and none of the members of the public that we know, none of our readers, none of your viewers understand any of this. The only thing they will understand is when they see a plane full of illegal migrants on their way to Rwanda.
Do you agree with, I mean, I made this point quite early on in the week when Suella's letter, before Suella's letter came out, didn't I? I felt like she was quite central to him getting the job and actually deflecting the second coming of Boris a year ago in July. Do you, from your sources and your experience, believe that what she said in her letter about I put you there and you've been a massive disappointment? Do you believe that? Was it sourness or fact?
I think there was a lot of fact in that. I think that Suella Braverman was one of the representatives of the wing of the party that he needed to win that vote. But as she points out, he does not have the votes of the rank and file membership, which Boris voted on the other candidate. So, and I think the real bombshell we're all waiting to see is the document that allegedly they both signed before she took the job as Home Secretary, which spelled out all the conditions on which she would expect to operate.
Number 10 yesterday saying that didn't exist, didn't it?
Well, I think that there must be something. I don't know. I haven't seen it. She hasn't shown me. But there must be letters, exchanges that she's got documentary evidence on, and she will use them.
And he's still sticking with it. Rather unbelievably, because this is a policy, even if it does go through, say it would take another year to come into force anyway, even then, it's estimated that about 500 people they have capacity for. Meanwhile, we've got a 170,000 person backlog. Why is he flogging this apparently dead horse, Trevor?
Well, he's nailed his colours to the mast from day one, so basically it's one of his 5 promises. And somehow the whole thing is now so complicated, people have lost faith in the whole project. So I think that nobody's going to believe that this is going to happen until it does. Until they've seen that this is the voting public who might be persuaded to see this as a dividing line upon which they will change their voting positions. they will not change their positions until the first plane takes off.
And of course, Starmer's still offering to stop the boats. You know, and that was the pledge. One of those 5 key pledges was to stop the boats. Starmer is still offering that as part of his offering, but he's doing it in a different way. He's not, you know, he's not sticking with the Rwanda policy in any way, shape or form.
No, he says to get rid of it straight away, right?
He's going to ditch the Rwanda policy as soon as he comes into office, but he has no alternative. There is absolutely no way that Yvette Cooper or Keir Starmer have spelled out any reasonable or likely option for stopping the boats, except to basically make illegal immigration legal.
My problem with it, and I'd be really interested in somebody of your experience's opinion, 170,000 backlog, 140 million quid to pay 500 people. You said it yourself, the Prime Minister has nailed his colours to a mast that many people don't think is achievable. Is it just electioneering? Is it to cut Suella Braverman off, you know, at the pass? I don't understand why somebody doesn't have the truthful ability to stand up in front of the British public and say, our immigration policy is in tatters, our Home Office is not fit for purpose. I might not be here beyond 12 months, but I'm going to give every one of my efforts to making sure this country, which is supposed to be the 5th most powerful in the world, has a processing system that deals with a problem that affects millions of people in this country, Trevor. I don't understand.
Well, there's a simple answer, Jeremy, and if you read the Daily Telegraph today, there's an article by an anonymous Home Office official in which he spells out the fact, which we all knew, but he does so in terms that basically nobody in the Home Office is prepared to allow the Tory government to deport anybody. So, I mean, it is a very interesting article because it is a systematic destruction of the whole argument of the blob being prepared to go with the government of the day, the elected, democratically elected ministers. They are obstructing it at every stage from here across Europe and elsewhere.
Moving on to, well, back now to what happened last night with the Labour rebellion. Can you see this having a long-term negative impact on Starmer, or will he just be emboldened as this like strong leader who's no longer Mr. Flip-Flop?
I think you nailed it on the last point. I think that for Keir Starmer, this is a test of his integrity, leadership, resoluteness, and so on.
Statesman-like ability, right?
And of course, he's in tune with America and with the government and with Western Europe. So were he to step out of line on this and move in the direction of those rebels, that would be a different kettle of fish. This is him being firm and resolute.
But there are, of course, growing calls from the British population to call for a ceasefire. You know, people...
Are there?
Yes.
Are there?
Yes.
I mean, I'd love to know.
Every Saturday, the number of people who are calling for a ceasefire on the pro-Palestine marches grows and grows and grows, not just in London, but across the country.
Trevor Kavanagh's shaking his head.
I'm sure he's shaking his head. But there is only so long that people can see continued images of those hostages who are still being kept there. Hardly any of them have been freed at all. There doesn't seem to be much movement on that. And innocent civilians being continuously bombed, women, children, innocent people dying. You can understand why there are growing calls for a ceasefire, not just, you know, here, but globally.
Well, of course, there's international dismay at what's happening in Gaza, and the sight of children being hauled out of the rubble, dead and alive, is appalling. But you're not going to stop that happening simply by having a ceasefire, because Hamas is not going to abide by a ceasefire. So how can you have a ceasefire if one side refuses point blank and actually says so publicly that they're not going to abide by it? And, you know, you mentioned hostages. Until they start releasing hostages, in fact, all of them would have to be released for a ceasefire to work. And that isn't going to happen. How can a ceasefire begin? It's an emotional response from the general public, which is fully understandable. And those numbers in Trafalgar Square and elsewhere at the weekends, in fact, though they are large numbers, admittedly, I don't think they reflect the opinion of the British public at all.
But they reflect the opinion of the people who are there, and
absolutely.
that number is certainly growing.
Very interesting what you said about ceasefire. We love having you on. Thank you. His roundup. Just very quickly, 10 seconds, they'll shout at me. David Cameron?
Well, my first impression was that it was a disaster. And my second impression was that it was a catastrophe. I think that...
Is that DC, David Cameron, disaster catastrophe? You got that right, Trev.
Absolutely.
That's like
there you are.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Trevor Kavanagh, thank you as always.